In today's episode, we're looking at 5 people who were ripped apart while on a quest to take selfies with animals. From a drone hobbyist who got too close to a grizzly bear family in Montana, to a teacher whose innocent photo in shallow waters attracted a bull shark. But first, we start in Montana, where comfort in the wilderness proved fatally misplaced. It was October 15, 2016. And the golden aspens of Flathead National Forest stretched endlessly across the Montana landscape. The air was crisp with early winter's promise, and the silence was broken only by the occasional crack of a branch or distant bird call. This was wilderness in its purest form, vast, untamed, and unforgiving to those who underestimated its power. Knox Merritt had driven up from Missoula that morning, his truck loaded with camera gear and his latest acquisition, a high-end drone equipped with Follow Me technology. At 25, he was a mechanical engineering graduate student who had built a modest YouTube following documenting outdoor gear tests. His 8,000 subscribers knew him as methodical and thorough, someone who pushed equipment to its limits in remote locations. Friends described him as brilliant but stubborn, the type who reads manuals cover to cover, but dismissed park safety guidelines as suggestions for tourists. Knox had chosen this particular trail for its isolation and dramatic vistas. He wanted to test his drone's new wide-angle lens and Follow Me mode, which would track his movements automatically while filming. The technology fascinated him, the precision, the engineering behind it. He had studied the weather patterns, charged his batteries, and planned his route with characteristic attention to detail. What he hadn't planned for was sharing the forest with its most dangerous resident. Grizzly bears are among North America's most formidable predators, with adult females weighing up to 400 pounds and males reaching 800 pounds or more. They can run 35 miles per hour and have a bite force exceeding 1,200 pounds per square inch. Mother bears with cubs are particularly aggressive, viewing any perceived threat as reason to attack without warning. Their sense of smell is 7 times stronger than a bloodhound's, and they can detect scents from miles away. In autumn, they become increasingly territorial as they prepare for winter hibernation. Knox had been hiking for 2 hours when he spotted a massive grizzly sow with 2 cubs foraging near a berry patch about 200 meters away. His pulse quickened, not with fear but with excitement. This was exactly the kind of footage that would set his channel apart. He pulled out his drone controller and activated Follow Me mode, positioning himself for what he envisioned as an incredible shot, him in the foreground with the bear family in the background. The drone lifted off with a quiet whir, its camera automatically tracking Knox as he began walking backward toward a small clearing. His eyes were fixed on the controller screen, watching the composition come together perfectly. The bears looked peaceful, almost posed against the autumn landscape. He adjusted his position, moving closer to get the framing just right. What Knox didn't realize was that the wind had shifted, carrying his scent directly toward the sow. Her head snapped up immediately, nostrils flaring as she identified the human smell. She rose on her hind legs, scanning the area until she spotted him. Knox was still focused on his screen, completely unaware that 400 pounds of protective fury had locked onto him as a threat. The sow dropped to all fours and began moving toward him, slowly at first, then with increasing speed. Her cubs scrambled up a nearby tree as she had taught them. By the time Knox looked up from his controller, she had already covered half the distance between them. He froze, the controller slipping from his hands as the massive bear charged across the remaining 50 feet in seconds. She hit him with the force of a small car, her claws raking across his chest as the impact drove him backward into the brush. Knox's shoulders separated with an audible pop as he hit the ground, but the sow wasn't finished. She grabbed him by the torso, her jaws crushing ribs as she shook him like a rag doll. Knox's spine snapped under the pressure. Blood poured from multiple puncture wounds as the bear's teeth found vital organs. She dragged him several feet through the undergrowth before releasing him and stepping back, huffing heavily. Knox lay motionless, his body broken beyond repair. The drone continued circling overhead, its camera recording the aftermath until the battery finally died. The sow watched for several minutes before returning to her cubs, who climbed down from their tree refuge. Knox's body wasn't discovered until 3 days later, when park rangers followed the drone's GPS signal after his roommate reported him missing. The investigation revealed that he had violated multiple wilderness safety protocols by approaching too close to a bear with cubs. The sow and her offspring were monitored but not relocated, as officials determined she had acted defensively. Knox's YouTube channel was quietly taken down by his family. His final video, uploaded automatically from his phone's scheduled posts, was a gear review of the very drone that had captured his death. Knox learned too late that technology couldn't protect him from nature's raw power. For Isla Munro and Sawyer Beck, it was a faulty gate that turned their honeymoon into tragedy. It was March 22, 2015, and the humid air of Chiang Mai province hung heavy with the scent of jasmine and diesel fumes. In the hills outside the city, a facility calling itself an ethical tiger sanctuary drew tourists with promises of close encounters and conservation education. The bamboo structures and lush vegetation created an illusion of natural habitat, but beneath the surface, corners were being cut in ways that would prove deadly. Isla Munro and Sawyer Beck had arrived in Thailand 5 days earlier for their honeymoon. Isla, 27, taught middle school art and had an adventurous spirit that constantly sought out experiences beyond the typical tourist trail. Sawyer, 29, worked in IT and maintained a modest travel blog read mostly by friends and co-workers. They weren't influencers, just a couple who enjoyed documenting their adventures and sharing them with their small online community. The sanctuary had been Isla's choice, selected after hours of research into what she believed were ethical wildlife encounters. The facility's website emphasized conservation and education, with photos of visitors safely interacting with tiger cubs under professional supervision. What the marketing materials didn't mention were the facility's financial struggles and the resulting shortcuts in safety protocols. The guide that day was Somchai, a young man with limited experience who had been hired just weeks earlier. The facility was understaffed and operating on a shoestring budget, relying heavily on inexperienced workers who received minimal training. Somchai had been told the basics: keep tourists away from adult tigers, supervise cub interactions, and always secure the transport gates. But in the chaos of managing multiple tour groups, critical details were often overlooked. Tigers are apex predators capable of killing prey much larger than humans. An adult tiger can weigh up to 660 pounds and possesses a bite force of 1,000 pounds per square inch. They're ambush hunters, capable of explosive bursts of speed reaching 35 miles per hour. Even in captivity, their predatory instincts remain intact, and they can attack without warning when startled or threatened. The couple was led to a semi-open enclosure where several tiger cubs played under the afternoon sun. The area was separated from the adult tiger section by a series of gates and barriers, designed to allow staff to move animals safely between enclosures. Isla and Sawyer settled onto a wooden bench as Somchai brought over a 6-month-old cub for supervised interaction. Isla was delighted, gently stroking the cub's fur while Sawyer prepared his camera for what they planned as their signature honeymoon photo. The cub was docile and well socialized, purring softly as Isla scratched behind its ears. Everything seemed perfect as Sawyer positioned himself beside his wife, extending his arm to frame the shot. What none of them noticed was that Sawyer had inadvertently leaned against one of the transport gates. The latch, which should have been secured with a padlock, had been left unlocked by a staff member who assumed the area had been cleared after the morning feeding. The gate was designed to swing inward under pressure, and Sawyer's weight was gradually pushing it open. Behind the gate, a 400-pound adult male tiger named Raja paced restlessly. He had been moved to the transport area earlier that morning and forgotten in the confusion of managing tour groups. The scent of humans and the presence of the cub had made him increasingly agitated. The gate creaked open just wide enough for Raja to squeeze through. Isla and Sawyer were completely focused on their photo, with Somchai distracted by another tourist question. The adult tiger emerged silently, his massive frame moving with predatory grace as he assessed the situation. Raja struck without warning, lunging at Isla with explosive force. His claws raked across her back as his weight drove her to the ground. She screamed as his jaws clamped down on her shoulder, crushing bone and tearing through muscle. Sawyer spun around and instinctively threw himself at the tiger, trying to pull his wife free. The tiger released Isla and turned on Sawyer, swatting him aside with a paw that sent him crashing into the wooden fence. Raja's claws opened 4 deep gashes across Sawyer's chest before his teeth found the young man's throat. The bite was swift and devastating, crushing his windpipe and severing major arteries. Somchai screamed for help as other staff members came running. The facility's emergency protocol called for tranquilizer guns, but in the panic, no one could locate the equipment quickly enough. By the time senior staff arrived with noisemakers and barriers to drive Raja back, both Isla and Sawyer lay motionless in pools of blood. Isla had died from massive blood loss caused by the tiger's claws puncturing her lung and severing arteries in her shoulder. Sawyer's injuries were even more severe. His throat had been crushed, and he had lost consciousness within seconds of the attack. Both were pronounced dead at the scene. The authorities launched an investigation that revealed numerous safety violations at the facility. The sanctuary was immediately shut down, and criminal charges were filed against the owners for negligent homicide. The case was quietly settled out of court, with the families receiving undisclosed compensation. The tiger cubs were relocated to a legitimate conservation facility, while Raja and the other adult tigers were transferred to a government-run sanctuary with proper security measures. The facility's property was eventually sold and converted to a hotel. Isla and Sawyer's travel blog remained online for months after their deaths, their final post describing their excitement about visiting the tiger sanctuary. Friends eventually took it down, unable to bear the contrast between their hopeful words and the tragedy that followed. The couple had trusted in professional supervision that failed them. For Brielle Sutton, it was her own misreading of the environment that proved fatal. It was May 18, 2017, and the Florida Everglades shimmered under an oppressive afternoon sun. The air was thick with humidity and the buzz of insects, while Spanish moss draped from cypress trees like tattered curtains. In the shallow waters of Lokahatchee Wildlife Refuge, the boundary between land and water blurred into a maze of sawgrass and hidden channels where danger lurked just beneath the surface. Brielle Sutton had convinced 3 classmates to join her for a post-exam celebration in the wetlands. At 16, she was known at school as the quiet nature lover who ran a modest Instagram account focused on Florida's endangered ecosystems. Her post rarely got more than a few dozen likes, but she was passionate about wildlife photography and often ventured off-mark trails to capture unique compositions. Recent viral success with a photo of a rare bird had emboldened her to take more creative risks. The group had spent the morning on the designated boardwalk, taking typical tourist photos and complaining about the heat. But Brielle was restless, scanning the landscape for something more interesting than the standard wildlife viewing spots. She had searched the area extensively and knew the most photogenic locations were often away from the crowds. When they reached a bend in the trail where a shallow pool extended into a grove of moss-draped trees, Brielle spotted what looked like the perfect backdrop. The water was only knee-deep, with what appeared to be an old log extending from the bank, ideal for a unique perspective shot with the Spanish moss creating a natural frame. American alligators are perfectly adapted ambush predators, capable of remaining motionless for hours while waiting for prey. They can hold their breath for up to 24 hours and often float just below the surface with only their eyes and nostrils exposed. An adult alligator's bite force exceeds 2,900 pounds per square inch, stronger than any other animal in North America. They typically avoid humans, but will attack if surprised or if they perceive a threat to their territory. Brielle waded into the shallow water, her phone held high as she composed the shot. Her friends called out warnings about snakes and alligators, but she waved them off with the confidence of someone who had spent countless hours in similar environments without incident. The water was warm and murky, stirred up by her movement as she approached what she assumed was a partially submerged log. The log was actually a 12-foot alligator that had been resting motionless in the shallow water, its body covered by a thin layer of algae and debris. The reptile had been there for hours, perfectly camouflaged and waiting for fish or birds to come within striking range. Brielle's approach and the vibrations from her movement triggered its predatory instincts. She positioned herself carefully, one foot on what she believed was solid wood, preparing to squat down for the perfect angle. The surface felt rough and stable beneath her sneaker as she shifted her weight and raised her phone to capture the shot. The alligator exploded from the water with terrifying speed, its massive jaw snapping shut around Brielle's leg just above the knee. The force of the bite shattered her femur instantly as the reptile's teeth, designed to grip and hold prey, punctured deep into muscle and bone. Brielle's scream was cut short as the alligator's death roll began. The reptile spun violently, using its powerful tail and body weight to disorient its prey. Brielle was pulled under the murky water, her phone flying from her hand as she was dragged toward deeper water. The alligator's grip never loosened as it continued the death roll, a hunting technique designed to drown prey and tear away chunks of flesh. Her friends screamed from the bank, but there was nothing they could do. The water churned red as the alligator's teeth found arteries, and Brielle's struggles grew weaker with each passing second. Within 2 minutes, the thrashing stopped, and the water began to settle. Park rangers arrived within 20 minutes, alerted by the frantic 911 call from Brielle's friends. They used long poles and noisemakers to drive the alligator away from the area, but it was too late. Brielle's body was recovered 18 hours later by specialized teams who tracked the alligator to its den through drag marks in the mud. The investigation revealed that Brielle had ignored multiple warning signs posted throughout the refuge about alligator dangers. The attack was ruled accidental, with no fault assigned to park management. The alligator was captured and relocated to a more remote area of the Everglades, following standard protocols for animals involved in fatal encounters. Brielle's Instagram account became a memorial, with friends and family sharing memories of her passion for nature and photography. Her final post, uploaded automatically from her phone's scheduled content, was a photo of sunrise over the wetlands with a caption about the beauty of Florida's wild spaces. The refuge added additional warning signs and increased ranger patrols in areas where visitors might be tempted to leave designated paths. Brielle's death served as a stark reminder that even familiar environments can harbor deadly surprises. Brielle's mistake was trusting her eyes over her instincts. For Nolan Kerrigan, it was his ego that led him into a confrontation with one of nature's most powerful creatures. It was August 14, 2018, and the mist hung low over Uganda's Bwindi impenetrable forest, creating an otherworldly atmosphere among the ancient trees. The dense canopy filtered sunlight into scattered beams that illuminated the forest floor, where centuries of fallen leaves created a carpet that muffled every footstep. This was one of the last refuges of the mountain gorilla, a place where humans were visitors in a kingdom ruled by creatures of immense power and intelligence. Nolan Kerrigan had joined a guided gorilla trekking expedition as part of what he called his authentic Africa experience. At 34, he worked as a sustainable housing consultant and had recently begun promoting ecotourism through a modest blog read primarily by environmental professionals and green architecture enthusiasts. He wasn't famous, but he took pride in positioning himself as more knowledgeable than typical tourists, often challenging guides and correcting other group members. The trek had begun before dawn, with 8 tourists following experienced guides through increasingly dense vegetation. Nolan had researched mountain gorillas extensively, reading academic papers about their behavior and social structure. He felt confident in his understanding of these creatures and frequently shared facts with the group, despite the guide's request for silence. Their destination was the territory of the Rushagura family, a group of 17 mountain gorillas led by a massive silverback named Marima. The guides had been tracking this family for years and knew their patterns intimately. As they approached the gorilla's current location, the lead guide reminded everyone of the critical rules. Maintain a 7-meter distance, avoid direct eye contact, stay low to appear non-threatening, and never make sudden movements or loud noises. Mountain gorillas are among the most powerful primates on Earth, with adult silverbacks weighing up to 400 pounds and possessing the strength of 10 men. Despite their primarily vegetarian diet, they have massive canine teeth and can become extremely aggressive when they perceive threats to their family group. Silverbacks use chest beating, charging, and physical dominance to maintain order and protect their troop. While generally peaceful, they will not hesitate to attack if their authority is challenged or their family is threatened. The group had been observing the gorilla family for 20 minutes when Marima emerged from behind a cluster of bamboo stalks. The silverback was magnificent, his silver-gray back gleaming in the filtered sunlight, his massive frame moving with surprising grace through the undergrowth. Several females and juveniles fed peacefully nearby, occasionally glancing at the human visitors with mild curiosity. The tourists crouched in respectful silence, cameras clicking softly as they documented this rare encounter. The guides monitored both the gorillas and their charges, ready to intervene if anyone violated the safety protocols. Everything was proceeding perfectly, until Nolan decided he needed a better shot. While the others remained crouched, Nolan slowly stood to his full height, raising his phone above his head to capture what he envisioned as a panoramic selfie with the silverback in the background. The guide immediately whispered for him to get down, but Nolan waved him off dismissively, believing his research had given him superior insight into gorilla behavior. To make matters worse, Nolan made a soft clicking sound with his tongue, trying to get Marima to look toward the camera. The silverback's head snapped up immediately, his dark eyes locking onto the standing human. In gorilla society, standing tall and making direct challenges are acts of aggression that demanded a response from the dominant male. Marima rose to his full height, his massive chest expanding as he began the intimidation display that precedes an attack. He beat his chest with thunderous blows that echoed through the forest, the sound reverberating off the trees like gunshots. The other gorillas scattered, mothers grabbing their young as they retreated to safety. Nolan finally realized his mistake and began to lower himself, but it was too late. The silverback had interpreted his behavior as a direct challenge to his authority, and gorilla social structure demanded a violent response. Marima charged with explosive speed, covering the distance between them in 3 powerful strides. The impact was devastating. The silverback's massive hands grabbed Nolan by the shoulders and slammed him to the ground with bone-crushing force. Nolan's collarbone snapped audibly as he hit the forest floor, but Marima wasn't finished. The gorilla's powerful jaws clamped down on Nolan's torso, his canine teeth puncturing through ribs and into vital organs. Marima lifted Nolan's broken body and shook him violently before hurling him against a tree trunk. The impact shattered Nolan's spine and skull, ending his life instantly. The silverback stood over the motionless form for several seconds, huffing and beating his chest one final time to assert his dominance. The guides immediately began their emergency protocol, using smoke canisters and noisemakers to drive the agitated gorilla away from the group. The other tourists were evacuated quickly while radio calls went out for medical assistance. By the time the helicopter medics arrived 2 hours later, there was nothing they could do. Nolan's death was ruled the result of his own actions in violating established safety protocols. The Uganda Wildlife Authority conducted a thorough investigation but found no fault with the guides or the trekking procedures. Marima and his family were monitored closely for several weeks but showed no unusual aggression towards subsequent visitor groups. New safety measures were implemented, including mandatory pre-trek briefings with video demonstrations of proper behavior around gorillas. Guides were given additional authority to remove tourists who refused to follow instructions, and group sizes were reduced to make supervision easier. Nolan's blog remained online for months after his death, his final post describing his excitement about the upcoming gorilla encounter. His family eventually took it down, unable to reconcile his confident words with the tragedy that followed. Nolan's arrogance had cost him everything in the confrontation with a creature that demanded respect. For Evangeline Rowe, it was a moment of innocent joy that attracted a predator from the depths. It was July 8, 2016, and the Caribbean sun blazed overhead as gentle waves lapped against the white sand beaches of Tulum. The water was crystal clear, revealing patches of seagrass and coral that created a living mosaic beneath the surface. Near the mangrove inlets, where fresh water mixed with salt, the ecosystem teemed with life, including predators that most tourists never imagined could be lurking in such shallow, seemingly safe waters. Evangeline Rowe had brought her family to Mexico's Riviera for a much-needed break from a challenging school year. At 38, she was a passionate middle school science teacher who used her own adventures to inspire her students' love of marine biology. She wasn't seeking social media fame, just creating memories with her 12-year-old daughter Maya and documenting their coastal explorations for friends who followed their family adventures online. The day had been perfect so far. They had explored ancient Mayan ruins, snorkeled over shallow reefs, and spent hours beachcombing. As afternoon approached, they found themselves at a secluded inlet where mangrove roots created natural pools. The water was warm and inviting, barely waist deep, with a sandy bottom that seemed perfect for wading and photography. Bull sharks are among the most dangerous sharks in the world, responsible for more attacks on humans than any other species except great whites. Unlike most sharks, they can tolerate fresh water and often hunt in shallow coastal areas, estuaries, and mangrove systems. They are aggressive, territorial predators that can grow up to 11 feet long and weigh over 500 pounds. Their powerful jaws contain rows of triangular teeth designed to tear flesh, and they often attack without warning. Maya stood on the sandy shore with her mother's phone, preparing to capture what they planned as their favorite vacation photo. Evangeline waded into the shallow water, the warm liquid reaching just above her waist as she moved toward the center of the inlet. She turned toward her daughter with a bright smile, raising her arms in a gesture of pure joy. The movement stirred up sediment from the bottom, creating small clouds that drifted with the gentle current. The shark had been patrolling the inlet's deeper channels, following scent trails from the mangroves. When Evangeline's movement created disturbance in the water column, the shark's predatory instincts were triggered immediately. Maya was adjusting the camera angle when her mother suddenly screamed. The bull shark had struck from below and behind, its powerful jaws clamping down on Evangeline's left thigh with crushing force. The impact drove her underwater as the shark's teeth severed the femoral artery and tore through muscle and bone. Evangeline fought desperately to reach the surface, her hands clawing at the water as blood poured from the massive wound. The shark released its grip momentarily, circling in the clouded water as it prepared for a second attack. She managed to break the surface, gasping and screaming for help as she tried to swim toward shore. Maya dropped the phone and screamed for her mother. The shark struck again, this time targeting Evangeline's lower back and side. Its teeth punctured her kidney and tore through her spine, paralyzing her instantly. She went under again, her struggles growing weaker as blood loss and shock took hold. A local fisherman heard the screams and rushed over in his small boat, using his paddle to strike the water and drive the shark away. He pulled Evangeline from the inlet, but her injuries were catastrophic. The femoral artery had been completely severed, and she had lost massive amounts of blood. Despite desperate efforts to stop the bleeding and rush transport to the nearest medical facility, Evangeline was pronounced dead within an hour. The combination of blood loss, shock, and internal injuries had been too severe to overcome. Mexican authorities investigated the incident and determined it was a tragic accident. New warning signs were posted about shark activity in mangrove areas, and local tour operators began including shark safety information in their briefings. The bull shark was never located, having disappeared into the vast network of channels and reefs. Maya was cared for by resort staff until relatives could arrive. The phone that had been meant to capture a joyful moment was found later, its final video showing the crystal clear water suddenly turning red as screams echoed across the peaceful inlet. Thanks for watching this video. Just when you think you understand the rules of the wild, we're just getting started. Click the next video for more stories that will show you how quickly paradise can turn deadly.